Hi there, it's Lloyd Alvarez again with another tutorial. Today we're going to play with fire. As a kid, I loved nothing more than playing with fire. I got myself in a lot of trouble as a kid playing with fire. I even set our own backyard on fire once. And so it was with great pleasure for me to be able to find this excellent new plugin called Turbulence 2.5D. And that is because you essentially play with fire in After Effects without endangering anyone or anything, except for maybe your processors, because obviously this takes some computing power, but it's not too bad. I was actually playing with it on a laptop, on a MacBook, not even a MacBook Pro, but a regular MacBook laptop, and it was totally responsive. So let's take a look at this piece that I put together for this demo. So, you know, I also, I guess, use this opportunity to do a little animation for the new branding for all the AEtuts sites, going from the old logo to the new logo. So let's really break down what we're going to do here. So the way this plugin works is it actually works with fuel. So what I did is I took the old logo and I told it this is the fuel, and then, you know, controlled some parameters that make this sort of flame, and then made the new logo another separate fuel layer, and also made the obstacle layer for this other flame. So that's why it actually interacts with it. You know, and here you can see the fire kind of growing around it and stuff, and you know, and that's it. It's you know, it's literally because, like, imagine if you were trying to get a fire to do what you wanted it to do in real life. It would be one of those things where you'd have to, like, tinker with where the log is and then things, and that's kind of how this plugin works. So even though I think it uses particles to create the file image, it does not behave like a normal particle generator. So let's get right to it. We're gonna create I just created a new comp here, and I'm gonna create a new solid. I'm gonna call this Turbulence, even though or no, we're gonna call it Fire. And then to this layer we're gonna apply, it's a Jawsit Turbulence 2D, and by the way, this plugin only costs 99 euros, so it's very affordable for what it does. You know, this is the same math and simulation engine that's in the very high-end 3D liquid simulation plugins. So to have this in 2D is really great. Okay, so once you apply this, the very first thing you need to do to get this going is you need to give it some fuel. And fuel is any layer, any item. And so I'm gonna just literally use the shape tool here and create some little sort of, think of these as you know, when you go to the to buy your barbecue charcoal, and they have these little white things that you put in and that make things burn really quickly. So that's what these are. And so basically I'm just going to go into here, and this is not going to be a comprehensive tutorial on how to use this plugin, because the plugin could use an entire PhD on how to use. I'm just going to show you guys how I created this, and I'm going to try and explain as much as I can the way that I understand it, because there's a few things that I don't understand completely. But I was just really so excited about this. I really wanted to get something done here so you guys could start playing with fire yourselves. Okay, so you open up source control, and there's actually the first thing you want to do is you want to set this cache path to something you can control. So I'm gonna put that in let's see, fire tut. Here we go. I'm gonna create a new, and I'm gonna call this cache. And I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this 1, and I'll explain why in a second. So that's the cache, and then I'm going to set the fuel layer to the shape layer. Okay, so that's it, nothing else. And so now you go up here and then you basically hit this restart simulation. And so this is basically what it's doing in real time. This is calculating this fire simulation. So you can see how it took the little pieces of the layer and it's kind of like it lit them on fire, and then this is the fire that's sort of happening because of it. This is a pretty fast computer, so I'm getting between, it started at like 4 frames per second, now it's at about 2. For comparison's sake, on the laptop, the MacBook, I was getting about, you know, half a frame per second to 1 frame per second. So you can see the sort of the difference in variation. And what it's doing, it's essentially rendering these frames to that cache folder that we just created. And the good news is that, well, that's now, it's kind of like a pre-rendering this layer. So let's go ahead and stop this. You can just stop that at any time. And then when you do a RAM preview now, it's very fast because all it's doing is it's basically loading up these files from that cache. And then, you know, once we do the RAM preview, we can watch this back. And just right out of the box, you can see we're getting something really sweet looking. You know, it's pretty great. Now, you can also turn off the shape layer, by the way, so you just get the fire, as you can see here. All right, so that's pretty cool. Now, what we gotta do is start controlling how this flame behaves, and this is where, you know, there's some really esoterically named things in here, like density layer and temperature layer and all this stuff. And so we're just gonna basically address the ones that I use to be able to get the stuff the way I liked it. Also, there's this simulation parameters here. Domain type open means that it burns from all sides, and the first thing we're going to do is add some gravity, so that basically I don't want this to go up so fast so quickly. So if I crank up the gravity, I'm going to crank it up all the way to 100. Is the one thing that I'm going to do. And then the other thing is this heat creation parameter. Oh, and actually, before I do that, there's time scale. So time scale, it's kind of like a fast forward button. Right now it's kind of like a 1-to-1. So if I go to 5, so notice here, but also notice that when I change the parameters, nothing happens. You need to, every time you change things and you want them to take effect, you have to go over here and restart the simulation. But notice here that at time scale 1, it took about, you know, I don't know, 6 seconds to get to the top here. So now that I've gotten to 5, it's gonna go much faster. I'm gonna do a little bit of editing just so we don't have to watch this thing render every time. Okay, so let's take a look at now. So notice how it reaches the top almost in less than 2 seconds. Look, so this is the other thing that happens is if you stop the rendering or the simulation and there's still the old, see, this is the old simulation still here, so you know, it kind of switches. So just be mindful of that's what's happening. It's not like it's not behaving properly, it's just that it's loading up the old frames. It has no way of knowing which ones are the new ones and which ones are the old ones. So because I stopped it here, we only have up to here, and then it reverts back. So okay, so now we have this working a lot faster. And even though I turned up the gravity, there's one other thing that I need to change, and that's this thing called heat creation. Heat creation is how quickly the flame generates heat and then basically goes up. So by lowering this, it's kind of slower. So I'm gonna lower it to like 500 and then hit restart. So now it doesn't generate heat as quickly, and therefore it's going to basically rise slower, which is kind of what I'm going for here. Okay, so now we preview this and we can see it's basically going up slower. And if we even lower this even more, because of the high gravity, it technically should start actually going down. So let's go 250 and restart. Okay, and let's take a preview of this, and you'll see that in the initial, when it first lights up the fire, it gets this little burst of heat that flows up, but then you can see that some of the flames now are actually going down, which is kind of cool. Let me loop that. So what's really cool about this is, like, you know, when you first start it, it's kind of like when you light a match, you get this like extra burst, and then it kind of settles down, which is kind of cool. So one other thing that I want to do here is, I actually wanted to have more power because I wanted to go up, but I wanted to notice that before, when it was going up, it was kind of going straight up, and we weren't getting any of these curlies that are kind of cool and to me kind of indicative of a flame. So the one thing that you can actually use to get that is this divergence layer, which essentially it's you know, kind of like a roadblock per se. It's different than the obstacle layer, and we're gonna get to that in a second. So what I did is I created a fractal map. So I'm gonna make a solid here called fractal, and then fractal noise, and crank up the contrast here. All right. So let's go ahead and pre-comp that, and then move all attributes. So we'll call that fractal comp, and turn it off. So now we're going to select the divergence layer to be the fractal. And let's see, and I'm gonna go back up to 500, so we get some going ups, and restart. Okay, let's see, I think I need to make this fractal smaller. So I'm gonna scale it and transform here. Yep. There we go. So there's more patterns. So let's try this again. Alright, and now we're getting some interesting action there. Oh. So I think we can also now lower the heat creation back down to 250. And the other thing is we can also turn up the cooling. That apparently is sort of a cooling device to keep the flames from going up too high. So let's see what that does. As you can see now, that actually was too much, maybe. Let's see, let's go back to 500. Here's the other thing, is that when you're playing around, which I guarantee you're going to be doing a lot of, it's a lot more fun, or it's helpful to kind of do one thing at a time, change one parameter, and then, you know, see what that does, and then change another parameter. So we're starting to get some curling here, sort of more early on. I hope you can see why this could just eat up hours and hours of time. But, you know, again, if you ever enjoyed playing with fire as a kid, it's going to be extremely rewarding. So this is starting, so again, you're starting to see how it distorts, but then it goes. So I'm going to lower it from 500 to, say, 350. And preview this one more time. So now this is looking pretty cool. Now, what's really great too is that the fuel layer can be moving. So, for example, if you were going to be creating a torch in a movie and of special effects, you could track, you know, the fuel source to the top of the torch in an actor, and then the flame is actually going to react accordingly. So now that now I feel this is looking kind of like I like it, even with the stuff dropping a little bit. It's kind of cool looking. So let's preview this. Very nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-comp this shape layer, because now I'm going to create all my motion kind of in the pre-comp, and I'll call this fuel. Let's see, fuel. That's good. Fuel, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this into one little guy. Actually, let's get rid of this. Just make a round thing for the sake of simplicity here, and we're going to animate it from here to here, and we'll have it go up and down. Okay, so it's a little too fast. Let's make this happen over 6 seconds. If you hold down the Option key, by the way, and you drag on the last keyframe, it actually stretches them out like this. It's a good little hint. Okay, so there we go. So now we go back and just make sure our fuel layer is still selected to fuel, which it is. So let's preview this now. So check this out. Now the fuel is basically being generated by this moving object. So I mean, I hope you can see the possibilities here with like meteor animations and, you know, I don't know, like rocket. So I mean, those are all the obvious, which is why I was trying to do something sort of more graphic related, motion graphic related, because I think the VFX applications are quite obvious. Okay, let's take a look at this. So this is looking pretty cool. So again, if you wanted to not have the fuel drop, we can just up again the heat creation. So let's go to like 450. And then the last thing I want to show you before we move on to the logo is that the fuel can stop. So if at, say, 4 seconds, at 4 seconds here, I can just end it so that then there's no white dot, right? So we have this white dot, and then it just boop, goes away. So you'll see what effect that has here when we do this simulation. Essentially, it's just like turning off the flame, and the fire, whatever flame was created, still burns itself out, but you know, no more fire is created. All right, let's take a look at this. So now, now the flames are rising a little bit more because there's more heat creation, and then poof, when the ball disappears, there's no more new flames, but the old ones kind of burn themselves out in a cool, very cool way. Okay, now if I wanted to lower the amount of sort of wiggliness, I could lower the fractal contrast here. So let's go with like 50. See what that looks like. All right, now so you can see. Now the only reason I'm showing you guys all these variations is because, you know, I want you guys to gain something from the hours and hours that I spent playing with it. Notice how just changing that parameter alone just totally changes the look of this. If anything, I feel it's looking a little bit more like ink in water. Like that's a really cool effect there at the end, actually. This stuff here is great. So one of the requests we get a lot, by the way, is how to do this Coldplay's Viva Loca iPod commercial. And you know, there's all these little ink squirts going on all over the place. So I guarantee you with this plugin, you could do a really nice version of that effect. I believe they just use real ink being squirted into you know, water, but having this control and having it look this great is really powerful. All right, so let's start moving to the actual logo. So the first thing I did was, so now into fuel, we'll go into fuel, and we'll rename this old logo. Get rid of this, and here's the old logo. And I actually have it split into 2 layers. I have the type separated because this way I can stencil it out. Stencil alpha, no, silhouette alpha. And this basically just gives me holes in the mat. So I'm going to parent this and basically position it where I want it. I don't know, about here. And the last thing I wanted to tell you is that the fuel works on a level from black to white. So white being the most intense and black being the least intense. And so if you have something that's of a color, it converts it to the closest grayscale value, and it uses that as the intensity. So if you want to control it more yourself, you can just I'm going to use fill here and make this white because I want this to be really intense. So let's take a look. And I'm going to turn up the fractal contrast a little bit. Alright. So that should still be linked as the fuel layer, old logo. And let's take a look. Now notice this purple color. That's because by using the white logo, it's the most intense fire. So it's kind of like using a very highly flammable substance. And so when you have really hot flames, they actually turn blue and purple. So that's what's happening here. So if I want to control that, I can just lower the amount. So let's take a look at this real quick first of all. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. But if I just make this not white, so I'm gonna just, you can do it one of two ways. We can either make it sort of gray, or you could lower the opacity. Both would work. All right, so now that this is like this, restart again. So notice now that it's not burning us hot. We're also getting some stuff shooting down, but we're not getting as much as the purple. And again, we're not going to get exactly what we did on the first one because, you know, like I said, it's like playing with fire. Still getting a little bit of the purple, so I guess we could lower that a little bit more. And it's dropping, so I want it to go up. So I'm gonna, again, although this is kind of cool, let's see. So I'm gonna increase the heat creation. So I'm gonna go to 1,000 here. And and then so open is it burns from all sides, and then half open is as if it was sitting on a plate, so that it'll actually only go up. But I like it open, but just so you know what the difference is in those two. So now that we have that set to 1,000, it's going to go straight up, which is what I had in the preview animation. So if we look here, so this is straight up like this, and I believe, ooh, look at that, we got crazy going on now. So let's preview this. It's kind of cool. So, and the reason, and see how it even leaves the ghosted image. So right around here, right after it goes off, I'm gonna just stop it and zoom in a little bit here, and actually I'm gonna dissolve it away so that it's kind of graceful. So restart that. So basically once it basically goes poof, then you can see here I dissolved away the fire source and we just get the one flame. So we're basically finishing with the first part of the effect. Oh, wait, well, that's what we need to do is have the old or the new logo act as a. I think we can let it burn just a little longer. Let's let it burn till here. Oops. And the last thing we need to do now is animate the new logo coming down. And we're going to use that as an optical layer. So the new logo is here. So I have it as also separated as two layers. And I'm just going to preview the old size. So we're gonna make it roughly the same size, like that. And I got a little fancy with the way it animates down and stuff, kind of like swinging and swaying and stuff. But for right now, we're just gonna make it straight down animation. So I'm just gonna have it end here and then come up here. So let's see. We can give it a little bit of rotation. So let's ease those suckers, easy ease. Okay, and what we're going to do is pre-comp this, and we're going to call this new logo, and we're going to call this type. And what we're going to do is in the fire simulation, under obstacle layer, which is here, obstacle layer, we're going to pick the new logo type. And what that does is it basically makes it interact. Basically, the fire is going to interact with that logo. So I'm going to restart the simulation. So you can see here how the flame is actually now being pushed by the new logo. Now it's not being pushed a lot, and that's because we need to give the obstacle a little bit of force, a little bit of wind. So let's stop that. But let's just take a look at it real quick. So that's pretty interesting actually on its own. But if you notice here, there's something that says obstacle layer has velocity. The metaphor they use for velocity is the same thing if you use a 3D program and you have motion vectors. It's the same concept, and this is what a motion vector guide looks like. So in this very center, which is if you're doing RGB, this would be, and in float, like 0 to 1 values, this would be 0.5 red, 0.5 green, and then 0 blue, I believe. Yeah, see if you can see it up here. So if you look at the RGB values here, so and R goes to 255, so in the center is 127, basically. So 127 red, 127 green, and 0 blue. That's 0 motion. And as you kind of go into these directions, this is going very fast in this sort of top right direction, very fast in the bottom right direction, very fast in the top or bottom left, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do to get this logo, this new type logo, to get sort of some force, think of it as like wind, I guess. I'm just going to take this actual guide itself because I want it to actually push in exactly these directions, and I'm just going to sort of scale it so that it's the size of the logo, so it covers it. And I'm going to parent it, and then I'm just going to toggle the switches mode. And this little T here stands for preserve transparency, so it just preserves the transparency of the layer below it. So there, now I have the velocity basically vectors mapped onto this logo. So if I come back to the main thing and I come back to my fire, under obstacle layer has velocity, we just turn that on, and we turn this off so we can see what's happening. And let's restart the simulation. Alright, let's see. It's still not pushing it. Let's take a look here. Aha! Obstacle velocity is set to 1, so we can actually crank this up. Let's crank it up to 5 and re-simulate. I know it's kind of tedious to constantly doing these simulations, but if you consider the power of what you're doing here in After Effects, in 3D these simulations take much longer. So this is really not bad at all. So actually we are seeing some of this. It's actually just pushing it here to the right and left, but because the fire finishes before we get to the bottom, so let's change it so that the fire doesn't extinguish until we get to the bottom. So this is where I want this old logo to stop. So looks like I can give it a lot more fire. And then, maybe there. All right. All right, so actually this looks pretty cool. So you can basically are only appreciating the velocity at the very end. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cheat just so that you guys can see what's happening. So forward that there. And take a little gander. See if we can start the simulation here. If you hit update sometimes, yeah, so look, when you hit update versus restart, it picks up the simulation where it left off, but because it needs the fire from before, this is not going to work, because it basically starts the simulation at that point with these parameters. But I'm going to stop this. I'm going to restart because it needs. So the problem and the reason you have to keep doing this and it doesn't work with a normal After Effects metaphor is that the way the simulation works is it calculates, you know, everything. It's dependent on what happened the frame before, because the pixels push themselves around frame by frame. So that's why you have to start the simulation from the top if you change parameters like this, like having the fuel last longer. So now you can see the fire being pushed away, and you know these velocity parameters are pushing this flame with some velocity. This is kind of cool, like the fire just is trapped down there and it's just looking for a place to escape. Fascinating. So let's see it. Let's preview this. Ah, that's sexy. All right, so let's keep that. That's pretty cool. All right, so this comes down, and let's take a look at the animation. So as this comes down, then what happens is I have the other one sort of flame up. Yeah, so, all right, so what I did for that is I brought in the new logo, which is this one. So let's go ahead and turn this on so we can see this. So I'm actually going to do is duplicate this. I'm going to reveal source and project, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to call it new logo base. And I'm going to duplicate this and attach the base basically to the bottom. I can get rid of the motion vector guide, and I'm going to do the same trick where I'm going to silhouette the alpha, and in this one I don't want it to be moving, so I'm going to just delete all these keyframes and make sure this is lined up properly. Alright, and bring it into my comp. So now I have the new logo type, duplicate that, and then the new logo base. And I'm going to turn that off. I can also turn off the type. And so this is going to be called, I'm going to rename it from fire to type fire. And I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to call this base fire. Now the cool thing is that all my parameters are still there, but the one thing that you need to change right away is the cache path, because otherwise when you do the simulation they're both going to write to the same place and they're going to override each other's renders. So I'm going to go back out and I'm going to create a new folder called 2, and I could call it base 2 if I wanted to, whatever. This is in my opinion, this is a temporary thing that you eventually delete, but if you want to save it, you can put it in a more permanent place, because again, it's kind of like saving a pre-render. You can always regenerate it, but obviously that takes time. So if it's a long, complicated simulation, then you know you might want to save it in a place where you know, where it's more permanent. And every time you launch the program, it will read that location. So it's like you can have it persistent between sessions. Okay, so now let's concentrate on the base. So when the type lands, where's the type? So when the type lands, I have this sort of explosion that happens. So kind of like around here. And the way I did that is I just basically turned the base on there. Just a couple of frames. Oops. So just the opacity 0. So now it just dissolves up. And again, made this white so that it's more intense, the fire. And then just change in here, change the fuel layer to be new logo base. And then let's see if we need to change any of the other parameters, but this might be pretty good. So let's restart this. You know what? It's actually the I apologize. What I'm gonna do is, instead of creating a new logo base, we're going to go into the old logo and actually rename this just logos, base logos. And then when dissolve this one away here, we're going to bring in the new logo. So we'll just bring in new logo base into here. So, and just the other little tricky that I did is I actually scaled it so that when it was over, I just scaled it on Y like this. So it kind of felt like it was more on top. We can just start it there, actually. So let's go to base logo. So let's see why this is at this point. Yeah. Okay. So new logo base. We want it to be full there, and go to base logo and actually make this happen here. And bring these so that they stop. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to make this exchange here. And then by having it scale up is what I got this to be, sort of this sideways motion. See that? So even though that would be a no-no because it's just fire and the fuel, it works. So let's see. So this is actually so I mislabeled. So this one's going to be type fire. So let's just turn this off for now. Just gonna delete that. This is called the base fire. Sorry, I got them backwards, but that's because we're going to create a new flame for the coming type. So let's restart this. All right, so let's take a look. So as you can see, it now does this little expansion thing, but again, we're getting the purples, and I think that's just because the white is too much. So let's just go again with a 50% here, and we're gonna go into base logo. What we'll do is just after here, so we'll trim this out so we don't get confused, and just after it's generated, we're going to dissolve it away, so that we just have that little burst of energy, but then it goes away. And then just trim it there. Because if we look at the animation here, you see, like, I just wanted this explosion moment and then have it go away instantly. So now it expands and then goes away. All right? So let's re-simulate. All right, let's take a look. Okay, great. So now we have the explosion and then it dissipates. And we have these really great looking flames that happen here at the bottom. All right. So now what we're going to do is create flames for the type coming down. So as you can see, so this is what we just created here. But then this type has its own sort of fire happening behind it. And that's what we're going to create now. And that's, sorry, why I was slightly confused there before. But now that we have this, we can duplicate this and now call this type fire. And then change the, so we make sure that we're in this one and change the cache for this one. We'll create a new one called type so we don't get confused, okay? And so for this one, we're gonna create a, so this one's the type, but this one's got this like funky color. So if I reveal in project, I'm gonna call it logo type fuel because we want it to be just white. And then duplicate this in here and bring this in. We can turn these off, by the way. So go into fuel and essentially just turn this off and make it white. Okay? So now when we go to the type fire turbulence, we can assign that to be the fuel layer. So fuel layer is going to be new logo type fuel, essentially white. And we'll go ahead and turn off, well, no, actually, we don't need to turn it off. We can just, with just leaving the settings the same, we're gonna restart the simulation and see what happens. So again, remember that we had the moving fuel layer before and how that interacted with it. So let's see how that affects this now. So basically we're getting nothing, and I think that's because we need to, well, first let's make sure we have fuel there the whole time. Yep, okay. So let's see. I think we need to crank up the heat creation because it's moving so fast and it needs more juice. So let's do 2000 in the heat creation and let's turn down the cooling and see how this works. Aha. The one thing also that you want to do is make sure you turn off the type from being its own obstacle layer, right? So now we don't want an obstacle layer because we want it to just sort of be a fuel source. There we go. So now I've actually cranked up the heat creation, so see if that affects it. All right, let's preview that. I think my heat's cranked up really high. It is. So let's bring that back down. Let's actually bring this down to like 250. See what happens. So that we see more of a trail of it. Oh, and open, yep. Okay. Yeah, here we go. This is what I did. Get more of a short flame trail now. Fantastic. And then we're going to do the same thing. The second that the type hits, we're going to, let's take a look here. So the second the type hits, so that those flames turn off as well. So, see, now that it hits, it gets all crazy and stuff. So we can, the second it hits, we're going to stop it. So let's just preview this. Yeah. All right. So right here when it hits, we're going to go to the logo type fuel and just stop it. So it boop, goes away. And of course we don't have to have it on, so let's just turn it off. Well, you know, there's one last copy we're gonna make, and we're gonna call this one double. We're gonna call this new logo type visible. And duplicate this one and turn it off and then bring it in, because this is the one that we're actually going to see. But I actually have a ramp here, and I made the ramp be from this orangey color to a sort of brighter. I got them backwards. So this one here is the sort of darker orangey color, and then here sort of a brighter one. Let's bring this down. All right. So now, and then this one I don't turn off. Let's see what I did here. So when it's coming down, it's in that orange color, and then when it hits, it turns white. So right as it hits, okay, we're gonna animate the ramp away. So 0 there. So now we have it there, and boom, it goes, turns white. So now, and then so that we don't get this darkness, I just made it an add transfer mode, which is why we have this sort of like, it's like eating away. So if we bring this brightness up, sort of looks like it's, you know, kind of behind the fuel, which looks kind of cool. So let's restart this simulation. I think we can lower the value of this one. The fuel, I think, can be, so just bring down the opacity, that works. Yeah, and that is crazy. Notice how just by lowering the intensity, the flames, you know, they just start falling a little bit. But I think that's kind of cool. Interesting that these are falling now. Let's see what that looks like. All right, let's take a look at this. I gotta tell you, I love playing with fire. So this is just this is different, you know, than what I did before, but it's kind of cool looking as well. And then what I did is at the impact point here, I put a glow. So I had glow, a blur. It's a blur, blur, blur. So I think I did like 5 box blur. So I had maybe 1 box blur before, actually 0. And then, so when it hits here, I also had a glow, add a glow. There you go. And then animate the glow away to 0 and 0. That looks pretty cool. Don't forget to save, by the way. Actually, increment and save. And let's take a preview. Oh well, let's yeah, let's just preview this. That's what's cool. These kinds of changes don't need to be resimmed. And then the last thing I did was just reveal the background. So if I go into the base here, copy this out, paste. So just remove the effects here, no fill, and put this behind the fire, like so. Just dissolve this up. Nice and slow dissolve. And I had it also just move up, so if I attach this to, if I parent this together, and I can just do a little position animation so that it goes to the center. And then just do a little easy ease into this one, and then easy ease out of this one. And so let's preview this. I think it can be a little later. Bring this in. Let's finish the simulation for these two guys, by the way, because they didn't go all the way. So let's go to like 6 seconds here. So restart those. All right, and through the power of editing, we can see the fruits of our labors here. Of course, I added some sound effects to help the drama along. Oh, what happened? Where's my type? Make sure the type keeps going there. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the great new Turbulence Fire plugin for After Effects and how I created this. I hope that you guys start burning some stuff down and link to the site your finished pieces. This is Lloyd Alvarez again for AEtuts.